Perhaps you've heard of the Mandate of Heaven. It is a Chinese political philosophy widely known and used from ancient China all the way to its last imperial dynasty, the Qing. In essence, its philosophy justified the rule of China's emperor. One of the core beliefs surrounding this concept was that natural disasters were divine retributions, and revolts or instability were a direct result of a higher power indicating China's ruler was unworthy. No, the Qing dynasty had been ruling over China since the mid-17th century, but during the 19th century the empire suffered devastating rebellions such as the Taiping Rebellion, seeing millions of casualties. Japan won the Sino-Japanese War, forcing a humiliating peace onto the empire, and the Boxer Rebellion just a few years later once again led to bloodshed, famine and chaos, not to mention the 8 nations occupying Beijing. Surely this could not go on for much longer, and indeed, it wouldn't. In 1911, a sequence of events was triggered that would result in the abdication of China's last emperor and the collapse of the Qing dynasty. But interestingly enough, many plots had been devised for this to happen. Twisted irony had it that it all started with an accidental bomb explosion with no master plan at all. And this revolution would bring down China's final imperial dynasty after having ruled over the empire for nearly 3 centuries. Over the years, Qing power and their Mandate of Heaven had eroded. Movements such as the Rice Recovery Movement, the Yunnan peasant riots, and natural disasters were all signs of a dynasty in severe decline. To give you an idea of China's state by 1910, there had been 285 uprisings and rebellion in that year alone. But most of these were sparked by peasants. Barely any were modern in the sense that they wanted to completely institutionally reform the empire, leaning on a clear ideological basis. There was just one modern revolutionary movement standing out and standing at the center of the revolutionary atmosphere, attempting to overthrow the Qing, the Revolutionary Alliance, also known as the Tongmenghui. Dr. Sun Yat-sen founded the Tongmenghui, China's first modern revolutionary secret society, and Sun Yat-sen wasn't standing by idly either. Between 1906 and 11, he instigated 10 rebellions. Although he instigated 10 uprisings in 5 years, all of them were vaguely planned and none succeeded. Nevertheless, the number of members of the Tongmenghui rose to 10,000 by 1911. Its members were from all walks of life. Still, they generally were well-educated Chinese who had studied abroad, most in Japan. Some revolutionaries were students, others were civil servants, members of the new provincial assemblies even, and several were soldiers or officers in new army units. But over time, the composition of the revolutionaries changed. Many figured the best way to spark a revolution eventually was to subvert Qing troops. They wanted to get the soldiers that weren't yet revolutionaries on their side, so to say. Revolutionaries joined the army, maintaining a low profile and recruiting other soldiers for their revolutionary cells. Throughout China, especially around the Wuchang, Hanyang, and Hankou districts in Wuhan, Hubei's capital, Qing opposition blossomed. Radical young Chinese formed revolutionary cells in these big cities. In 1911, large cities generally had multiple revolutionary cells. It was during this year Sun Yat-sen embarked on a fundraising campaign to the United States. After all, the revolution desperately needed funds if it was to succeed. In southern China, revolutionaries adopted the strategy of infiltrating the new army units, working with revolutionary branches active in the region. Most cities had a sizable portion of their new army secretly engaged in revolutionary activity. Not really a stable combination, to put it mildly. In order to recruit new members for their movement, these revolutionaries often created an elaborate guise of book clubs and fraternities. If authorities grew suspicious of these clubs and decided to investigate, they would simply disband their fake clubs, only to regroup after some time under a different name at a different location. To give you an idea of how widespread this was, in 1911 around 5,000 to 6,000 of the Hubei New Army troops turned out to be members of various secret revolutionary societies. This was about 1/3 of the entire military force. Can you imagine? The fact that such a sizable amount of the military was part of a secret resistance? Well, it was only a matter of time for things to turn sour. Modern-day Wuhan city in China used to consist of 3 towns, Hankou, Wuchang, and Hanyang. In these towns, the first rebellions broke out. On October 9, 1911, in a safe house amidst the Russian concession area of Hankou, a group of revolutionaries were fiddling with bombs. They were planning a terrorist attack. Unfortunately for them, something went wrong and the bomb exploded prematurely. While oftentimes Western powers would bribe Qing authorities if something happened on their territory, the blast of this bomb was too heavy not to let authorities investigate. Qing police and military raided the safe house. It quickly became clear what transpired, and they identified the 3 surviving men as revolutionaries. Authorities wasted no time and they executed the men immediately. But even though during the brief interrogation the men didn't give up their fellow conspirators, their death wasn't the end of it. Fate had it that the membership registers detailing all names of revolutionaries, thousands of them, survived the blast. The Qing authorities seized the records and now possessed the names of most, if not all, revolutionaries in the city. They realized these logs contained the names of their colleagues, at least 5,000 of them. Alarmed at the number of soldiers on the list, soldiers began rounding up any and all revolutionary soldiers they could find. But news rapidly spread. Soldiers who were members of secret societies understood that if they did not act fast, they too would be put against the wall. And as such, minor mutinies broke out. The first force that mutinied was a small force, the Wuchang 8 Engineer Battalion. On the morning of October 10th, ever since celebrated as Double 10 Day, they seized the ammunition depot of the city, and they were subsequently joined by transport and artillery units. They captured several of Wuchang's forts, and by the end of the day, 3 other regiments joined the resistance. The Governor-General of Wuchang, the Manchu Rucheng, failed to raise a sizable number of loyal troops to protect his office. He fled the city together with the army commander. Forces still loyal to the Qing were routed and over 500 were killed. The next day, October 11th, Hanyang was captured by revolutionaries. They seized the city's military arsenal and ironworks. Having a considerable reserve of supplies and weapons, once they captured Hanyang, the mutineers took it a step further. They established the military government of the Hubei province. But they didn't have a prestigious public figure to take control and lead the revolution. The principal architect of the revolution in China, Sun Yat-sen, was in the United States. He would actually not learn about the uprising until a month later, reading about it in a Denver newspaper. Instead of quickly returning to China and assuming leadership of the revolution, he first went to the United Kingdom and France to secure European neutrality. He managed to sway the British government that he would not loan any capital to the Qing anymore. Sun eventually returned to China, but only over 2 months after the revolution had started. In October, the revolution, confined to Wuhan for now, was still looking for its leader. The first person the revolutionaries approached was the president of the Provincial Assembly, who rapidly declined the offer. Li Yuanhong, one of the Hubei New Army's commanders, popular among his troops, was the second one to receive the request. He wasn't a revolutionary, but he did play a prominent role in an anti-imperialist political movement concerning China's railroads. Those in the Provincial Assembly liked him as well. Still, in probably exaggerated accounts, it is written he was forced at gunpoint to take on the assignment of leading these rebels. He certainly was hesitant, but eventually accepted. The next day, Hankou troops mutinied, captured the city, and the revolutionaries were on their way to capture the rest of the province. Once news of the revolt in the Hubei province reached the imperial government, their response was understandably to do everything in their power to absolutely annihilate the revolutionaries. The Minister of War, Yin Chang, coordinated the counterattack on Wuhan with 2 divisions of the Beiyang army. In Beijing, the Qing and especially Prince Chun, regent to the 5-year-old Emperor Puyi, was about to swallow his pride. The Beiyang army needed a competent general that senior officers knew and troops respected. Yuan Shikai was that person. He had led the Beiyang army for years and served the Qing dynasty for decades, but serving them for decades didn't mean the relationship was good. It just so happened to be Prince Chun himself who forced Yuan into retirement 2 years before. Yuan still held a grudge against the Qing because of it. While he held a grudge, he was an excellent negotiator, and unbeknownst to the Qing, he still was highly ambitious. For now, he waited, but when he finally gave in, he would come to power on his own terms. 10 days after the Hubei military government was proclaimed, the new army mutinied in both Shanxi and Hunan provinces. Massacres against the Manchu population took place, and Qing commanders were killed. The members of the Provincial Assembly explicitly voiced their support for the revolution. The uprising now began spreading over China. In Jiangxi, revolutionaries killed the governor and his family. In the southwest, in Yunnan, and the southeast, in Jiangxi, students, teachers, and merchants joined the army officers in revolt, declaring their independence from the Qing. The Tongmenghui took the leading central role in 3 provinces and formed anti-Qing alliances in many others. Now that revolt swept the provinces, the military significance of railways became apparent. Troops from Beijing were sent to Wuhan only to be cut off by rebellions in Jiangxi. Revolts blocked in the supply line of Yan Chang's army, and other commanders in the north started defying Qing orders. Instead of moving their troops south by the railways, these commanders met up and sent a telegram to Beijing containing 12 demands. The demands ranged from a functioning parliament and an elected prime minister, ratified by the emperor, to amnesty for all political offenders and blocking Manchus from official positions. As outrageous as these demands seem, the fact that Qing agreed to them within a week shows the dire situation the dynasty was in. During this time, Yuan was still negotiating both publicly and behind the scenes on various levels. The Qing appointed him as the commander of all Qing forces. Most senior military commanders backed him, and he even enjoyed loyalty of many troops. On November 8, 1911, he was elected Prime Minister of China by the Beijing Provisional National Assembly members. He was now to form a cabinet, which he did, primarily appointing his own loyalists. It seemed that China was moving toward a constitutional monarchy, just like Russia and Japan had. The entire month of November, Yuan Shikai played a political game attempting to profit from the situation, pressuring both the revolutionaries and the Qing dynasty. The Tongmenghui of Sun Yat-sen enjoyed an enormous amount of support among the Chinese. This only increased as the revolution spread throughout the crumbling empire. The revolutionaries captured Nanking in early December. It was China's second biggest city and the former capital. The symbolic defeat was crushing to the already weak Qing. It was reminiscent of the city's defeat in 1645, leading to the Ming dynasty's fall, and the city's capture by Taiping rebels under Han Chu-Quan in 1853. In Nanking, the Tongmenghui set up the provisional government. In the meantime, Yuan negotiated primarily with Prince Chun, regent of Puyi, and his consorts. But in December, the mother of Puyi took a leading role in the negotiations. She pushed for the resignation of Prince Chun and authorized Yuan Shikai to rule as prime minister, with the emperor, her son Puyi, only retaining a ceremonial role. This was reminiscent of the role Empress Dowager Cixi had allocated herself in the past decades, and thus not a very popular one. Several victories of Yuan's troops over the revolutionaries followed, but over time he realized that his usefulness to the Qing would once again fade with the suppression of the revolution. On Christmas Day that year, Sun Yat-sen arrived in Shanghai. The Tongmenghui had set up a provisional government at Nanjing, and Sun was just in time to be elected provisional president of the Chinese Republic by delegates of 16 provisional assemblies. On New Year's Day 1912, he assumed office, and the new Republic of China was born. It meant China now had both a Manchu emperor in Beijing and a Republican president in Nanjing, a situation that definitely could not go on for long. Sun realized he required an army to consolidate his power. A charismatic man with a keen eye for political moves, he sent Yuan Shikai a telegram stating he only accepted the provisional presidency so Yuan could later on assume the official presidency, as long as he supported the new republic. All the while, Yuan played both sides of the conflict. Recognizing the revolutionaries' momentum, he realized choosing their side would probably be most advantageous to him. As such, Yuan was willing to work with Sun, but indeed only if he could assume the presidency. He spent the next couple of weeks negotiating both secretly and publicly with both the provisional government in Nanking and the imperial government in Beijing. Late January 1912, 44 senior commanders of the Beiyang army serving under Yuan Shikai sent a telegram to Beijing urging them to re-establish a republic by having Puyi abdicate. The Qing's mandate of heaven had now truly waned. Southern China had basically seceded, and Yuan Shikai attempted to convince Puyi's regents that abdication was the only option left on the table. Some Manchu princes fled to Manchuria to lead the resistance, but the emperor's mother negotiated with Yuan. she managed to receive reassurance that Puyi could reside in the Forbidden City with his servants for years to come while receiving a generous stipend. Puyi, China's last emperor, abdicated on February 12, 1912. The Qing dynasty, the ancient monarchy, and the Chinese empire had officially come to an end. Yuan Shikai was granted full powers to organize a provisional republican government. Sun Yat-sen, staying true to his word, abdicated in favor of Yuan one day later. The deal was that Yuan would travel to Nanking to set up his government. However, unrest broke out in Beijing, allowing Yuan to remain there to maintain control. It is near certain Yuan had something to do with these episodes of turmoil. And as such, ominously, Yuan Shikai was sworn in Beijing, the imperial capital, and not Nanking, the republican capital. He was to have supreme power with loyalists appointed at crucial positions. In China's military and bureaucracy, a parliament was to be elected and full constitutional government was going to be established. As time went on, however, it became clear that Yuan Shikai had other plans for his own position and China as a whole. In 1912, after decades of hardships and erosion of their mandate of heaven, the Qing dynasty finally collapsed. After a brief period where Dr. Sun Yat-sen was China's first president, Yuan Shikai overtook this post and started his tenure. He prevented an all-out civil war, but was to betray the revolutionaries later on. What followed was the rapid decline of the republic into a period of warlordism. Feudal lords, often having served under Yuan Shikai, were now fighting for influence in their respective provinces. I've created a video on the era of warlords, and I'll link it on screen if you're interested in that. Thank you for watching this video. If there's a topic or event you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also really like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, you already gain access to the exclusive Patreon series. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.